Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Hello and welcome to Rabbits. We are exploring this novel by Terry Miles. We're getting into some pretty good. We're hitting into a bit of it in the backstory of our main character, and she's getting into the more juicy parts of her backstory. So, let's get into this.
I didn't think about connections again until years later, while I was playing Underlight. It wasn't anything about Underlight specifically that made me think of connections. It was just something in that moment. Maybe it was the smell of microwave popcorn coming from the unit next door, or the way the rain was hitting my window, but something triggered the memory. And
the older I get, the more that happens. I'll smell something and it'll trigger a memory, or I'll see something that's real similar but not quite, or I'll hear something, see a picture on the internet or something like that, and it just fires off a series of memories. That's kind of cool.
brought me right back to that table with my parents. Right back to the game called Connections. At first, it was a happy memory, but as I sat there reliving it, something slowly began to change.
Well, that's kind of eerie.
I started thinking about the gray feeling and the dark thing I'd felt coming for me in that city park. This led to me picturing my mom and dad trapped beneath that capsized ferry, kicking and screaming for help, and eventually to my envisioning both of their faces, floating in the freezing water, staring up into
that's not good.
nothing, forever alone in the dark. My usual relaxation techniques didn't work, and I was unable to get the image of my dying parents' faces out of my mind. So I left Underlight running, stood up, grabbed my leather jacket from the back of a nearby chair, and hurried out of my building.
I can imagine something like that being fairly traumatic.
Into the rain. I would be arrested 3 days later. During those 3 days, I did nothing but play my own version of Connections. I started with the final image my parents had shown me on the last day we'd...
That was interesting. I mean, that's just where her mind went.
played the game together. It was a color photograph of an old woman feeding a bunch of pigeons. One of the pigeons was different from the others, browner, with a reddish breast.
Interesting. Because all the pigeons we have here are kind of look like big old fat super doves.
I looked it up. It was a passenger pigeon, just standing there among the regular pigeons. But the last passenger pigeon had died in 1914, and modern-day Kodachrome color photography had not come into being until 1935.
Interesting. And the plot thickens.
It was an impossible photograph. The first word that popped into my mind was discrepancy.
Oddity would be one that I think oddity is what my brain would have probably went with, but discrepancy works for the story.
Based on the woman's clothing and the cars behind her on the street, the photograph had been taken sometime in the 1960s. An extinct bird, in a photograph taken almost 50 years after that bird had become extinct.
I wonder how much of that was... How much... Or I should say, let me start over. I wonder how hard it would be to replicate something like that. to Photoshop it with the imaging techniques that we have now to do an impossible picture like that. And especially if you're do a live action movie version of this, which I think they need to do, but that's just me.
Was definitely a discrepancy. It reminded me of another extinct bird, the imperial woodpecker Emily Connors had been so excited about. It reminded me of rabbits.
There we go. We're starting to make the connections.
The passenger pigeon and an address hidden in coded text on the park bench in that impossible photograph led me to a video store. Hanging in the window was
thing is, the brain does crazy things when it's stressed or traumatized.
was an Italian movie poster advertising a classic 1975 film by Michelangelo Antonioni. In Italian, the film was called Professione, Reporter, but in English, it was known as The Passenger.
Interesting. Very, very interesting.
In the end credits of that movie was a clue that led me to a specific page in an out-of-print edition of a French mystery novel. This, in turn, led me to a bus stop where I got on a bus and rode it until I discovered a wall covered in graffiti.
And in Seattle, Washington, that could be a wild thing. Like I've said in some of the podcast videos, my mom is originally from Seattle, and we go visit her family in Seattle, and just stuff like that. There is some wild stuff up there. Some really cool. It's wild, but it's cool wild. It's kind of like Austin. Kind of like the northwestern Austin, or maybe Austin is the central Texas Seattle.
There, hidden in the content of that graffiti, I found a message. Or perhaps I imagined I'd found a message. Either way, that message led me on a journey through the city, chasing clue after clue.
The thing is stuff like the graffiti and stuff, or even drawings and stuff like that, you can have accidental messages where something comes out of it that was not intended, but just coincidence of lines crossing, colors mixing, and stuff like that.
Until I eventually found myself arrested for trespassing in the basement of the Harvard Exit Theater, waiting for somebody or something that I referred to as the passenger.
The plot thickens.
By then, I was a mess. Nothing made any sense. I actually remember feeling a sense of relief when they finally arrested me. I was screened and assessed, then given the option of attending a mental health court or going through a normal criminal proceeding.
I would have chosen the mental health court just because I know in Texas you get a little bit better deal than you would in criminal court, but it is really, really hard in Texas to get into the mental health side of things.
Mental health courts, like drug courts, were created to divert defendants with mental illnesses from the overcrowded and overworked criminal justice system.
In Texas, we just put everybody into the criminal system so the governor and AG and lieutenant governor can make an ass ton of money on convict labor.
I opted for the former, and they let me go once I'd agreed to attend weekly counseling sessions. A few days after my arrest, I was back at home, and a month after that, I started my junior year of college. I never played the game called Connections again, not only because of what had happened to me in that theater, waiting for the passenger, but because I was about to find something better.
Always looking for that next fix, that next hit.
I was about to rediscover the game called Rabbits.
Interesting. I just love the way that it just kind of segues into that. You know, we get this build up, her backstory, you know, her parents and all that. It's just good storytelling.
Chapter 5. Baron Corduroy.
Oh, this is yeah. I don't want to spoil anything, but this is the you might want to break out the big box of Kleenex chapter.
I was startled awake by a series of aggressive buzzing sounds. Somebody was downstairs hammering on my apartment's call button. I live on the top floor of a 4-story older brick building in Capitol Hill.
I wonder, well, I know on the East Coast you have the brownstones. I just wonder if there's an equivalent on the West Coast.
On the plus side, there are crown moldings, hardwood floors, and leaded glass windows. Some of the negatives include an oil heating system that barely works, and a shower plagued by bursts of scalding hot water that occur whenever someone flushes the toilet in the apartment directly below mine.
You know, have lived in an apartment when I worked with TDC. Yeah, that is, and I lived in townhouse, and what it was one huge building with like 5 to 6 townhouses in each building. And that still happened. Though we have the portable oil heaters in our house here that we use in the winter because they're cheaper to run than trying to heat the entire house. Whatever room we're in, we just turn the one on that we got stationed in that room. It heats the room. It's efficient. I can say or at least in Texas, it doesn't get near as cold as it does in the north, but a well maintained and well working oil heater is worth its weight in gold.
The building superintendent claims he's been trying to figure out how to fix it for years, but I'm not sure I believe him. Circle K, what the fuck is happening? Baron brushed past me and headed straight for the kitchen. Have you slept? I asked. You look like you've been up all night. Spent the night working on a hookup app for a couple of grad students, he said, as he scoured my pantry for something to eat. Baron didn't actually look that bad, but his eyes had the wild, faraway look of a coder, that thick, wired glaze that working all night, staring at a screen, and listening to crazy loud music can produce.
And we'll go ahead and call this episode good here. We will continue in the next video. And until then, be a good human. Be good to other humans. Peace.